Here, just before I introduce our guest and begin the interview, I'll give everyone the rules. There's not many. Remember, I'm going to be throwing questions at Gabriel the whole time. You're more than welcome to ask questions, whether you're listening on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. If you write in a question, I'll either give it to Gabriel while we're talking, if it fits. Otherwise, we'll wait to the end. Usually, we spend the last 15 minutes or so of the next hour throwing more questions at Professor Gabriel if they didn't come up in our conversation. That's it. That's all there is to it. I hope you have a nice cup of coffee and somewhere comfortable to sit while we talk to Professor. So, let's go. Professor Gabriel, multiple time world champion. So happy to have you here talking to us, man. Very excited when I found out you'd be sitting down. Is there anything you want to say before I start barraging you with questions?
No, I just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. I know it's a great way to stay connected while we're living through this unprecedented time. So it's worked pretty well here too. We love to do those kind of interviews. I love to be a part of that, and I love to watch a lot of this content that Gracie Bob provides too when we're navigating through those times. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to talk about a lot of different subjects.
Awesome, awesome, man. Thank you. Well, hey, now you're the guest. You can sit down and watch yourself being interviewed after this is done. You can watch the recording. Alrighty, so Professor Gabriel, of course, I think you're a pretty big name within Gracie Barra. There's plenty of people here who know who you are. They've probably watched some of your fights, but others wouldn't know much about you yet. This will be their introduction to Professor Gabriel. So could you tell us maybe, where you were born in Brazil and how you found your way into martial arts and, of course, jiu-jitsu?
Well, I was born in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. It's a state of Minas Gerais in Brazil. So we jiu-jitsu roots in there. It's very strong. We grew up seeing a lot of the local tournaments being a big thing there already. And just martial arts in general. So I started was like 16. I was playing. I was working out and doing some Muay Thai. And at the gym, they had jiu-jitsu. So a lot of my friends invited me to try one of the classes. And after I tried for the first time, I knew it was something that I wanted to do in the long run. And started my journey there in a small local Gracie Baja and never stopped training ever since, unless I'm hurt or something comes
Yeah,
up.
yeah. How roughly how old were you when you started jiu-jitsu?
I was just around 16. Yeah, I was 16 years old. Yeah.
And so, you said you fell in love with it like straight away, first class maybe even. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you think you know why or where that came from?
I think it's just like coming from competitiveness when you're growing up with older cousins and older brothers. You're always like wrestling around and
Mm-hmm.
we would watch UFC and already have many idols representing Brazil in UFC.
Mm-hmm.
And then Vale Tudo back in the day, MMA in general, just using jiu-jitsu. So obviously I knew what jiu-jitsu was. I was just never had an opportunity to have a structure classes or anything like that, but I always knew what it was. I always thought it was interesting. So it was just a matter of time before I tried and see that I really loved it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, okay. Now, the what I've been reading online, my research to prepare for talking with you now, uh, some articles said it was around the time you were a blue belt is when you thought, okay, I'm really going to start working hard at competition, give my time to competition. Is that when that change happened, or was it from the moment you started training? I mean, you mentioned already you're kind of a competitive kid. Did you just want to fight already from the beginning?
Yeah, I was always competitive, and then even as a white belt, I was already like trying to become the best I could possibly become, try as hard as I could, but it wasn't so consistent up until I was a blue belt. I didn't even know the concept of our training every day, like we only had a certain amount of classes after a week. We had like 3 times a week, and everything on top of that would be just me like looking for extra training and stuff. So yeah, not until blue belt that it was like already, starting to train every day and really try to pursue in the competition scene too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when you did decide to begin focusing really hard on competition, why or what happened? You just got older, a bit more mature, and you thought, I'm gonna give this a proper go, or what happened?
Yeah, and I always been a competitor my entire life. Like
Mm.
I always practice sports. I used to compete in soccer, indoor soccer, swimming, uh, like even chess or everything I was doing all my life. I was very competitive. So, uh, so it was just like a matter of time before I was like, yeah, I like this. I'm gonna try competition too.
Hmm.
Plus, like just watching the competition, like Enrique remembers, like we were like white belts, we were like such a fans of the sport. We'll like watch the tournaments. I was like, man, I want to be a part of it. We want to like
Yeah.
compete on that stage too someday, you know?
Man, amazing. So you had the drive from a young age. I want to talk a lot more about your competition mindset and these things a little bit later in the interview. Let's carry on with kind of your biography for the time being. I think it's around blue belt is when you formed a really important friendship, I think, in your jiu-jitsu journey with Professor, well, who is now Professor Felipe Pena. He wasn't a professor, but professor at the time. Could you maybe tell us a bit about meeting him, what he's like as a person, and I think what's probably going to be important for a lot of our listeners, the nature of your friendship as training partners over the next few years.
Yeah, so that's what really led me the way to take competition seriously. He was the one that kind of broke down with me, put me under his wing. He was a purple belt, just won the IBJJF World Weight and Open Weight purple belt, so we knew how big that was and
Mm.
how up and coming athlete you need to be to accomplish something like that. And he was always been like a really nice guy to me, showing me the way, like telling me what to do and basically just follow him around. Like he would compete, I would go with him. Like he was competing as a brown belt, I was competing as a blue belt, and fixing our mistakes, drilling together.
Mm.
And then he's the one that was like, look, you got to train not just every day, but like multiple times a day. So that's when I start doing more seriously and obviously learning like a lot of the good jiu-jitsu that he has. So yeah, that's kind of how we went.
Mm. That partnership with Felipe, do you think it was just luck? Did it come out of a place of friendship, or what do you attribute that? Because it sounds too like you didn't just benefit from training with him, but he benefited from having you around to train with too.
Absolutely. When you're coming up, you want people that are as hungry as you to
Mm.
be willing to do the things that you were willing to do, you know. So you need training partners with the same mentality. So obviously, like he was just, for the most part just beating me, but like I would bring up a fight and try to like do as many rounds as I could, give the best,
Mm.
and obviously go to tournaments with him and learn and at the same time, like be there. You want someone that would be motivating you at the same time when you go on a journey like this.
Mm. Mm. Man, terrific. And then you ended up following Professor Felipe. I'm telling you things you did, of course. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? But you moved with Felipe to Gracie Barra Northridge and began training under Professor Romulo in, I think, 2012. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So came here to the States in 2012 for the first time for jiu-jitsu. Like I came here a few times. I have family here and stuff. But once I came as a blue belt, basically rent an apartment for like 9 people, like all 9 of us, just wanted to get a place and do the training camp under Romulo since he invited all of us. It was his first year
Mm.
with his
Mm.
school open, and he wanted to bring good training for him to prepare for Worlds. And it was a great opportunity to learn from such a legend and icon of our sport. And I didn't think twice. Like I just, book everything, stop, put a break on my college and gave it a shot. And that's when the first year that I came here, and then I just kept coming, trying harder and harder until I made it happen.
What? Sorry, Professor. What year was the first year you travelled over um, for that training camp?
Yeah, it was 2012.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
so
okay.
the
2012 was
first
the
time
first time.
I
I
came.
understand. I
Yeah.
understand. How did your college go? I hope we don't scare any of the parents here. Did you finish your college, or by then had jiu-jitsu started to kick off for you that you kind of never went back to it?
Well, jiu-jitsu started to kick off a little more. I at one point, like I was late purple belt. I almost like left the competition aside because I wasn't having the results I wanted
Mm-hmm,
up
mm-hmm.
until that point. So I already had a plan to stop competing in December of 2013. It's like I'm going to focus on college. I'm obviously going to do jiu-jitsu for the rest of my life, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go focus more on college because I just not seeing the results I wanted. And then that's when I won my first no-gi world championship and then kind of like shift things out. And I was like, okay,
Right.
I'll give it another year another shot and try to make it happen again. That's when things start to take off, and then it's hard to go to do that in Brazil, and be training here and studying Brazil was just
Yeah.
not viable, but yeah, luckily jiu-jitsu took off, and I figured if it was in the States, studying here and training, competing here, it would have been possible. But I just took a different route.
Mm. Man, I think you made the right choice. I think that's pretty clear by now. Well, maybe we'll talk more about this in a moment, but in that process, right up to getting, I think, your black belt in 2015, what was maybe the biggest challenge of, your young jiu-jitsu career as a colored belt? You're trying to make the life of a competitor work. You described yourself a moment ago. There were moments where you weren't sure. You thought maybe you were going to leave it behind. Was it just difficult to organize all those different things you're trying to juggle, or was it more tied to just how difficult it is to succeed in a sport like jiu-jitsu? What was hard about that journey?
I think it's just how hard it is to just succeed as a athlete, just an athlete
Mm.
itself. It's pretty hard, especially not being a black belt yet, especially jiu-jitsu. Uh, I would say like 6, 7 years ago when I was competing, it obviously wasn't as big as it is today.
For sure.
Even like see more opportunities for athletes. Still not good for you to just make a living out of it, but
Mm.
imagining like back then, even worse, even harder as a collar belt. So you had to really scramble around to find sponsors and stuff like that, and obviously teaching too, which is something I love to do,
Mm.
and kind of like kept me in track to make a living out of jiu-jitsu, which is always been the goal.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. You succeeded, brother. Well done. Alrighty. So, 2015. I think you were given your black belt on the podium when you fought at the Nogi Worlds. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Man,
So,
incredible.
yeah, I was like just around a year brown belt, and then it was a perfect timing because I won Ogi Worlds, but uh, Homewood could have held me for another 6 months to fight uh, another Gi Worlds as a brown belt, which a lot of coaches would have done back then. But he was like, "No, you're ready. Here's your black belt."
Wow.
And it was good because like 1 month later, I was winning Europeans as a black belt, like getting so much experience right off the bat as a
Mm.
rookie that if I got held another 6 months to a year as a brown belt,
Mm.
it could have set me back a little bit. Now looking back, like with everything that happened, I think was the timing could have been better. Like I'm not one to judge. Like I'll never like expect.
Yeah.
I was just happy to do it, to
Yeah.
compete. I knew the black belt would come one day, but the timing that it all happened was just perfect for my career.
Do you think that was masterminded by Professor Romulo, or do you think it was a little bit of good judgment, a little bit of luck that it kind of, because then you went on a tear on the global stage, right? 2016 world champion, 17 as well, and then 19.
Yeah, no, I think it was just like perfect timing coming from him, knowing exactly what you need, what like
Mm.
being so experienced as he was, he knew the competition scene, he knew me closely, watching me training, the work I was putting, how I was performing in the room. So he knew like I needed just a boost of confidence. That's why he held me. Maybe if he gave me a black belt right after I lost Gi Worlds in the first year, it would have been the same. But like I just kept grinding to get him ready to ADCC, which he
Mm.
won, and right after I won Nogi World, so we're both in pretty good shape. So he knew like I would do good first year black belt, and then it was perfect because, like I said, 2 weeks later I was winning weight and open weight
Mm.
in the open, which gave me points for worlds, which was the main goal, and then like a month later I was winning Europeans as a first major tournament. So it could have been better.
Yeah, incredible, man. Look, when you look back on those series of competitions, from getting your black to winning some huge titles, does it feel? It must feel kind of crazy. I mean, you strike me, talking to you now, you strike me as a very humble guy. You're not kind of boasting and going on in ways that other people for sure in the fight community might. But it must feel good looking back on those achievements, man.
Yeah, it's just memories, like I don't obviously you have your moments growing up. Your goals are different, like you want to accomplish things for yourself, but at the end of the day, it's just for good memories, That's why like I'm like I'm not gonna be like talking about it. Like it's always gonna be good memories with the ones that I share with, but it's not something like that ego thing that I
Mm,
just want to like keep talking and talking. Like that's why I don't talk so much about myself, but
sure, sure.
I love like helping the ones around me and like succeeding and being a part of like the competition scene too, seeing guys
Mm.
coming up the same way that I did with the same hunger that I had. So it's always good to see that within the team too.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm gonna try to make you talk a little bit for the last little while we're here together.
Okay.
Alrighty. Well, I think that kind of covers, especially for the people, like I mentioned, who are newer to who you are as a person. So much of your career, your growth through jiu-jitsu. Maybe now, like I mentioned before, when we had a brief chat, I wanted to talk a lot with you about competition. Preparation, training, the mindset, the journey from blue belt all the way to black. But really competition specific, not just because I think there's people listening who are competitors themselves who want that advice, those pieces of information, but and maybe I'd like your thoughts on this too, Professor. Approaching, even if you never step on the competition mats, maybe approaching training with a bit more structure, routine, goals, thinking about our mindset of training is probably a good way to get more out of our jiu-jitsu. Do you think that's true?
For sure, yeah. When you set your mind to do something that you obviously need to improve to wanna, do the best you can possibly do, it motivates you to train more, to stay in a routine, to better yourself in multiple ways. So, yeah, I always tell my students too, like just setting a goal to compete, say 2, 3, 4 months from now, it's gonna put you on a routine that's gonna be no matter what the outcome is, you win, you lose, but you always are gonna be a better person coming out of it. Sometimes there's gonna be adversities that you gotta overcome, and then it's gonna be a good experience regardless. If you lose, you definitely got a lot to learn from. If you win, it's gonna be a good memory too, and you always get a lot to learn from. So.
Mm, terrific. Okay, well, let's start breaking down the working parts of a champion. So, at blue belt, we said is when you started trying to compete a lot. At that time, did you have like good diet, good training routine? It sounds like you were training hard, but looking back now, with the benefit of hindsight, of course, what do you think of the way you approach your training and the structure you might have had or might not have had?
Well, it was just a lot of volume. I didn't have a school. I didn't do, you know, actually at Blue Belt, I was going to college. I was doing a lot of things. So like I was just all over the place. I wouldn't say my diet was correct.
Mm,
I was just like trying to make it happen, like trying to train as much as I could. Go to college, study, come back, train early in the morning, come back and train a couple more times at night. So just scrambling around to to make it happen. I wouldn't say that I really start getting serious about like supplementation and eating right until I was like a purple belt.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That process then, I know you mentioned before as well that actually it was at purple belt. You just said it's when you maybe got really serious about things, but it's also when you were thinking about maybe leaving serious competition behind. Maybe we can talk again about what kind of changed there. So like, tidying up your routine and supplements and diet and things. Did that happen before or after you were thinking about pulling back from competition at the purple belt?
Oh no, like even as like the second year blue belt when I came here,
Mm.
and then when I started doing those camps here in the States where like the school was left behind in Brazil, work was left behind. I like save money and come here and try to stay, from fans to the worlds, do all the little tournaments here, just focus on training. Then like my whole life was like surrounded around just training, eating,
Yeah.
resting, doing right, going to compete on the tournaments, drive to across the country to like fight certain tournaments. So that was like all in. But
Yeah.
yeah, first year blue belt in Brazil, still going to college, coming back and forth. That wasn't so you know I wasn't so particular with my diet or my preparation.
It sounds like you've always had a real drive behind you towards competition, but was discipline ever difficult, in terms of not just like pushing hard and going to training a lot, but being really disciplined in how you train and all those other things you mentioned, like, sleeping right, recovering right, stuff like that.
Yeah, it wasn't difficult. It was like what I wanted to do the most, you know.
Hmm.
So it wasn't, yeah, difficult because I knew what I had to do to reach those goals, and then yeah, you give up a lot of things, but at the end of the day, I was glad. I look back and I'm glad I done it. You know, like those things are temporary. You know, like when you're 20, 21, 22, you want to go out, like go out with your friends, have fun, travel more. You know, like it maybe gave up a little bit on that, but you can always enjoy life. You know, and as a competitor, you have such a short window of like
Yeah.
uh, of high performance that you just I just don't want to give that away. You know,
Hmm.
and that's yeah, I don't regret it at all.
Was how much putting your trust in the process, that's like a classic phrase people use, right? Trust the process. How much of finding trust in that process do you think came from yourself versus, say, your relationship with Professor Filippi, as well as, eventually going and training under Romulo and presumably being surrounded by a bunch of other athletes on the same journey?
And man, makes the whole difference, you know, like because with like they see what you're doing and they motivate you to try and that energy in the room just gets so much better, you know, like
Mm.
when you see people around you just reaching like great things, you know, you just keep doing what they're doing and then he hopes to reach somewhere there too. So a lot of times, like I said, I almost gave up on a journey. Like there were definitely like essential people in my life that kept me track and kept me motivated to try and not give up.
That's it. Okay, maybe let's keep talking about training partners then. I'm thinking especially of Professor Filippi, but perhaps in your life there's been more people who fit this description of, not just being in a room of killers, but those special like bonds, connections, guys you go and drill with in your own time maybe, or whose game is similar enough or maybe different enough that working with them is really valuable to you. What kind of advice towards finding those connections would you give young competitors or even students who, like we mentioned before, are not competitors, but they just want to maximize what they're getting out of their jiu-jitsu training?
Man, it's simple, you know, like when you make those connections, you know, you just push each other to get better, you know, and it doesn't necessarily means competition, right? But like if you have a training partner that motivates you, you know, sometimes you don't feel like going, but there's somebody holding yourself accountable to it. So like, hey, you're coming to jiu-jitsu, let's train, or like sometimes you're tired and you don't have that extra motivation to go. So having that camaraderie, like going to training and talking to your friends and one helping the other on the journey is just super, super important for your jiu-jitsu journey for sure, whether you try to compete or not.
Mm. Mm. You, when you're coaching now a lot, I imagine as well, right? You mentioned you like to teach jiu-jitsu. Is that something you kind of actively encourage the athletes to not just be one of the people in the room, but to like form those bonds?
Uh, if I encourage other people to be coaches too, is that what you're
Uh,
saying? Or
no, no,
just
sorry. In their training, right? To not just approach it as like, of course, competitors need to be a bit selfish with their time, with their
Mhm.
training, but jiu-jitsu is a sport that's so difficult and there's so much to learn from other people. And like it's been important in your journey, do you encourage your athletes that you're training to seek out those relationships, those friendships where they can like, man, me and this guy are going to go and drill. We're going to go push each other super hard. Is that something you actively, yeah, promote in your gym, in your space?
For sure, yeah. You gotta have the for the competitors, they gotta have that training partner that you can just hit up and hey, let's go drill, right? Let's
Mm,
figure things out, you know, like the
mm,
maybe on a weekend something more relaxed. You know, we used to do that a lot back in the day. You know, there was no training. We would like set mats up in the garage and just drill, watch DVDs. And he could remember like I bought my first DVD on a back then there was nothing on demand or digital. It was just like like those DVDs
yeah,
that you
yeah.
just those copies and then we bought our first I bought my first DVD. It was like Marcelo Garcia DVD back then. And we will watch and drill together, so if you're trying to be a competitor, you should be definitely on top of it. Try to have that training partner, build those connections to make each other better. You might drill together, and then he might see your training and say, "Look, you should be doing this," or "Let me show you something I've watched," or "Have you watched this fight? You know what that guy did?" That kind of thing really helps in jiu-jitsu. Again, if you try to compete, it's even more essential,
Mm.
for sure.
Man, awesome. Alrighty, I want to talk now about, I think, maybe you can tell me what you think, the most important part of jiu-jitsu competition. Maybe you can tell me if you think this is wrong, but is your mentality, both through the training camp leading up to, and then of course the day itself where you go and fight. Um, so I'm wondering if I'll ask your thoughts on some things, but also if maybe you can describe to us some of the biggest challenges you faced, maybe at training, maybe in your matches at some of the big competitions, and what you do beforehand or during to kind of keep your I guess your concentration, your focus, your emotions in check. What are you doing? What are some of the things you do to keep that part of your game, keep that part of your jiu-jitsu really where it needs to be?
You mean the mental aspect of it?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, well, there are different sides of it. Like, there's the mental aspect that you gotta be in tune with yourself for sure. If you're not in tune with yourself, if you're not like happy, it's hard to find that good balance and being an enjoyable experience. So that's one thing. And then on the winning side of it, like you definitely need to be confident and visualize and make sure that that's your day, and nobody else is gonna take it from you. So that takes a different approach. Like when you're trying to really like win big tournaments on a world class level, because all the other guys are gonna, the ones that really like have a chance to win, they're gonna have that mentality. So you only build that from like hard training. So if you,
Mm.
at least for me, like I can't say what's a perfect recipe, but like I know for myself, if I don't do everything right for a long period of time leading up to a big tournament, I don't have that confidence. Like I
Mm.
already know, like tournaments that I walked in on the venue, that I was like, I knew I had that doubt in my mind because I knew I wasn't prepared as I should be. I basically already knew. Like I know when I'm like gonna win, and I know when I'm not gonna win. It's pretty much like that. Like
Wow.
when I'm fully prepared, like in my mind, like there's no way that's not uh coming from the deserving point. I was like, yeah, I deserve so much. I've done everything right.
Mm. Mm.
Like this is gonna happen.
Mm.
It's gonna be hard, but it's gonna happen. But like if you have that doubt in your mind, like, oh yeah, I should have done a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, then basically you already lost. I
Yeah,
mean the big ones.
for sure, for sure. It's like I shouldn't have had that beer last weekend. Something like that, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Man, maybe this is a perfect time to ask one of the questions we've got from Professor Pedro Donelis. Professor Pedro asks, tell us about your world's final against Izaki, I hope I pronounced his last name correctly, Bahiense. Less than 10 seconds to go, you scored and you won. We were watching some fights, actually, my gym I train at, some students of ours were watching some fights on Zoom, and we watched this fight. Super hard fight. So in that moment, right, you just mentioned preparing yourself for the day, but then of course you run into a hard fight. So that fight with Izaki, well, what's going through your head through the whole match, and then the final moments when you managed to score?
It was when I was playing guard. I was and no points scored. I was like pretty confident I was gonna win. Like I was just trying to find and be like calculated risks too, because he's obviously very talented as well.
Mm.
And we had a match that was very scrambly a couple months back in the final of the King of the Mats, that I was able to out scramble him pretty well too. Same kind of thing, like he was winning, and then I had to pull some moves off on the last minute. So I know like he was holding it down, but I had good advantage like to score points from the bottom. He ended up like scoring like a surprising advantage for me, like with like maybe a minute and a half left. So I was down by an advantage, but I knew like coming from the bottom in the last minute, like I was was gonna find a scramble just like I did. It was definitely more clean in the King of the Mats. I was able to take him down, pass his guard, take his back, and just control for the rest of the fight.
Mm.
Because he was attacking a little bit more. But basically, in the worlds, I had in the back of my mind, yeah, he might hold me down, but I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna try my best to make it happen. So
Mm.
I just at that moment it's just autopilot, and you just try to like keep moving and make something happen because it's part of the world. Like you want to give everything. And
Yeah.
not having any regrets.
Matt,
Years to
how do you stay? You just use the phrase autopilot, which to me seems crazy because not only is Izaki an absolute monster and a great wrestler, and he's in a top position with an advantage ahead. That seems like in my head maybe one of the toughest spots to be, and you're down on the clock, and you're down on points. How did you stay so focused, ready to just keep going and look for that opportunity, so that when it came, you took it and you got the win? Does that come from the preparation or something else?
Yeah, it comes from the preparation and being there, done, and like that kind of like being there, done that.
Mm.
So I don't have any doubt. Like I've won out on that big stage before, so it makes you think like, okay, this time I'm gonna make it happen again. I know how to do it. It's like it definitely like a confidence thing too, but especially like having beating him like multiple times in the black belt. I was like, no, now it's world championship. Like I'm gonna try and make it happen. Um, but the out of pilots, it's just like years and years of jiu-jitsu that you start like the more you do it, the more, especially the positions and situations that you've done in so many years and trained so many years, like you can kind of like let yourself go and try to find
Mm.
your scramble and then things happen more naturally. I think it's better than just thinking um, too much. When
Mm.
there's 30 seconds, there's not much to think. You just
Yeah,
gotta go.
it's true, and the noise in that arena, man, be
Yeah.
deafening in moments like that too. Alrighty, another follow-up question from Professor Hodolfo. He asks, on this note, big match against Izaki when you won the world's final. But on that note, what was your most memorable tough fight in competition? For yourself, I suppose, your own opinion on your toughest fight.
I think there is one fight that's pretty, or two fights, I should say. Like the first year black belt, I had the two qualifying matches that I was down so many points and I came back from it. And it was like basically two world champions, Manuel Ribamar. And the first one I was down, it was 12-8, and it was 30 seconds left. So I was able to outscore that. I don't know how, but I just
Autopilot.
beat him, like barely beat him.
Yeah.
And on the second fight, I fought Celso Vinicius, who was a three-time black belt world champion too. And I was like first year black belt. And he basically took me down, guillotined me from the top. If you see in the video, my head is like purple. He passes my guard, and then I'm like down 5-0, and I'm like basically almost dying. I was about to go out. Somehow, like I held it just enough to like recover and outscore and beat him too. So that set the tone pretty well for me to go into the qualify to the second day in the
Mm.
first year of Black Belt Worlds and went all the way through to close with Professor Otávio for Gracie Barra too. So it was those two were pretty tough matches that I barely won. So like I just remember being in like big battles that built my confidence to try my best afterwards.
Does having those big battles at the beginning of the bracket, right before the finals, does that help? Does that give you like a bit of fire and confidence, like, man, the worst is behind me, or does it push the other way because it took so much of you to get those wins?
Man, it did take a lot of me. If it's like a lot of matches, it's starting matches like that on the same day probably puts a toll on you. But that's the downside. But like on the good side, you're definitely ready for anything. You way more lose. Your confidence is up that you can risk more because you just you're supposed to lose on the first fight. So everything that comes after that for you is just a plus. It's just a
Yeah.
win. So it definitely sucks in the moment of it. Like you want to have like a fight that you're controlling and you're not exposing yourself too much, not getting too tired. You still got a lot of matches ahead of you. But on the other hand, it just builds you up so much that it
Mm,
gives you the momentum that it's so important to in a tournament, you know?
mm, mm. Man, interesting. Maybe I wanted to talk about, the other side of mentality, which is not just what it takes to win, but what happens when you don't win. But another question here quickly from Gracie Baja West, right? I can't really see on the videos, but that might be Jeff tuning in. What's up, Jeff? He asks, Professor, do you agree that there's a lot of the referees that make calls against Gracie Baja because they're the biggest team and maybe jealousy is playing a part? What's your thought on that, on refereeing at the competitions?
Um, I think the refereeing is pretty balanced nowadays. There's a lot of complaints from different teams too in that regard, but I think there's for sure like a lot of hate towards Gracie Baja from other teams from how successful the team is and how well we do for our community for jiu-jitsu. For the most part, like the big ones like see respectfully, but there is a lot of hate coming towards Gracie Live, but I wouldn't say that comes from the referees, like
Mm,
I have never experienced that as a professional, but yeah, but there's hate everywhere, so maybe there's like a handful that feel that way, but I don't think it's a generalized thing that
mm.
happens towards Gracie Baja as a whole.
Mhm. Interesting, interesting. There you go, guys. Confirmation. There is no bias. Alrighty, maybe before we get to the questions that I just kind of alluded to, your longtime friend, Professor Enhiki, he wants to know if you can tell us a bit more about your experience fighting the first World Championship.
Yeah, so that was pretty interesting, and it was funny because like Professor Henrique remembers like as a white belt, we were like such jujitsu geeks already. Like we love jujitsu, just watching worlds. We'll buy the little videos, DVDs back then to watch every single fight of the World Championship. So for me, it was just like starstruck. Like when I was there in the black belt in the division that had so many guys that was watching, buying DVDs to watch their fights. So seeing myself there on the big stage was it was such a crazy experience, especially that first year black belt. That in my mind, I was like not supposed to be there. Like I knew everybody around me like would see me in the training in the training room would say like, yeah, like you ready to fight anybody, but it's still so fresh for me. I was just like a brown belt like
Mm,
months before, and then I didn't realize the amount of potential I had to like really like go out there and win on the first year. I would expect to win later on in my career, not right off the bat. So after that, like after those two crazy fights that I mentioned, day two, like I tapped Calazans, who was the current ADCC openweight champion and the current middleweight world champion. So that was like a huge stamp on my path to world championship two, getting two submissions on day two leading up
mhm.
to the final. So that was definitely like very very good experience competing my first year black belt. I couldn't believe like what I was doing.
Yeah, man, what a unique experience. Not many people will have that in their life. You get to carry that one the whole way through. That's amazing. Alrighty, I want to ask you some questions now about handling loss. Mentioned before, right? A lot of this, obviously, for you, it's in the context of competition, and probably those losses hurt more for you than some in the training rooms, I imagine. But I think maybe if you can tailor your answers to also accommodate, if you can, if I'm not asking too much, those students who, the big loss for them is maybe on the mats at training. They've worked hard for a month. They have a role with a tough training partner who they always struggle with, and it just one more time doesn't go their way. How do you cope with the repeat setbacks that come in jiu-jitsu, whether it's competition or at training? How do you like posture yourself to keep running into that challenge again and again?
I'll be honest with you. Like nowadays, I don't have that in training. I've had that in the past. When I was like in blue belt, getting frustrated training with really tough guys, and not being able to make it happen, you know. So that frustration just fueled me to do better and keep training, showing up more to training. But I know everybody's different. Sometimes a training can be very, very frustrating, you know, like, and especially on a competitive level that we would train back then, like 3 times a day. So like late at night, you're already on your, I wasn't ready on my at least 20th round of the day, you know. So
Mm.
like obviously your body, it's not out there anymore, and you're all broken, and sometimes it's frustrating. The day ends, and you're like, man, I didn't do anything right. So, but that just fueled me to keep showing up more and more. I know everybody's different,
Mm-hmm.
but nowadays, like the training doesn't frustrate me at all. You know, like I I have training as a very fun environment for me. You know, I try things, I get tapped, I tap, and a lot of the times, you know, like some of the students, they're like getting more experience. You start to training with me. Sometimes they're like, they obviously I'm putting myself in a situation, you know, like I can get tapped or whatever the case may be. But I notice that sometimes they don't want to go for it. They're like not used to, you know, maybe a high level or catching a high level
Mm.
competitor or athlete, you know. But sometimes I have to tell them like, look, if you get me there, you should be going. You're not helping me by not, you know, choking me or by not getting me on an armbar. I'm out here to get better, you know, like, so I don't mind. I don't get frustrated at all, you know, like when if somebody beat me up nowadays, I'm going to be so happy that I'm like, okay, I want to train this guy again, you know, and it just more a fun environment for me. Like training jiu-jitsu every day for me, it's a lifestyle
Mm.
beyond anything, you know. So I try to have fun. I don't beat myself up too much. But obviously, on the tournament, if you lose, not you. If you go out there, you want to win. So
Mm.
that's a little more frustrating, but that's just part of it. You know, like it motivates me to go out there and become a better martial artist. You know, and at the end of the day, like up to this day, like both ends of it, like both in training and in competition, losses make you better. You know, like you gotta get used to learn with adversities. You know, like it's not gonna go your way. Most of the time, it's not gonna go your way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's you just gotta learn to be patient, deal with it, and wake up the next day
Mm.
and do it all again.
Mm. Alrighty. Before I ask a follow-up question to this, actually, guys, I've just noticed the clock. We're running out of time. So if you have any more questions for Professor Gabriel, start throwing them in. We'll start churning through all your questions before we wrap up. Professor, I wanted to ask, you know, on this note of like dealing with loss and how it is a normal part, right? Competition or training, you're going to get tapped, you're going to lose, and sometimes it's going to really sting. Are there any experiences in competition that really the loss like was really particularly difficult for you afterwards? Um, Maybe even if only for like a day or two or the day of. Have you had that experience with any competitions?
For sure. I feel like the worst ones were I wasn't as mature. You know, like the losses, I started dealing with them much better throughout the years.
Hmm.
To the point that today, you know, like if I lose, I'm like, I wish I would care a little bit more, you know, because I feel like, you know, like at the beginning of my career, the loss would affect me so much, you know, because it was all that matters for me, you know, like when I
Hmm.
was a blue belt, 19-year-old hungry kid coming from Brazil to the States to pursue a competition, you know, like winning is literally like all that matters
Yeah. Yeah.
for me at that point, you know. So it's almost like unhealthy, you know. Like I back then, it was just all that matters for me. I just wanted to become world champion, you know. So the losses leading up to the point that I won were pretty difficult to deal with, you know, because in my mind I was ready, I was doing everything right. So you just question yourself, you know, like I'm putting all this time into this,
Mm.
and still have not made it happen, you know. So that those losses were tough to deal with because I needed to prove a point to myself and obviously make a career out of it. So you need wins, you need titles at first. But like I said, like throughout the years, I start getting more mature and figured out that it's not healthy to put all your energy into one thing too, you know. So
Mm.
I have other things going on in my life. They're just like equally as important as winning a tournament, or even like more important than winning a tournament. Like nowadays it fulfills me more to like help athletes around me or help my students that are not necessarily competing, but just uh, helping them have better lives. So build strong connections with like new friends every day that are my students, meet new people and make a good community. So those things are important for me. Like if I win, if I lose next day, it's still gonna be there. So it's not. It's more healthy for me that way.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Do you think when you think about how you've matured, you mentioned previously when you were talking about your fight with Izaki, a kind of like been there, done that, right? You didn't feel the same pressure in that moment because you'd been through wars and things. Do you think that is a big part of your maturity? Do you think you maybe wouldn't have? I don't want to say you wouldn't have become mature because, like, you're a grown man. You don't need me to tell you whether or not you're mature, but you wouldn't have developed the same attitude towards loss, that same maturity towards at least competition, if you hadn't also been competing.
Yeah, maybe if I didn't win what I wanted to win so much throughout my whole life, I would still have that relationship with the loss that would have been unhealthy. It's like, why have I
Mm.
not achieved that yet? Especially if you're putting the work for so many years. But yeah, that helped build my character too. Like losing, winning, they're both put me to the point that I was like, okay, I just got to do it for myself. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, there's so many distractions around. And then there's like the media, and then there's like other team, like so many people watching. But at the end of the day, if you do it for yourself, put less pressure on it too. You just focus on what you want to do,
Mm.
and that's the end of it. That's the best way to go. I would say.
Mm. Man, you seem like very comfortable with your competition history now, man. So I'm happy for you. Well done. Alrighty, some more questions here from our friends tuning in. Jeff wants to know, how do you find the balance between studying jiu-jitsu, studying BJJ, drilling BJJ, and implementing it in a competition? He finishes by saying, "I have Brazilian jiu-jitsu ADD." How do you find a balance to your training regime?
I think it's try and error, like it's different for everybody. I think I've met people that don't drill at all and just like to train and it works for them. Uh, I I feel like technically I improve a lot when I'm watching tape. That's for sure. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's for me, it's very, very important. I don't necessarily need to like drill it, but if at least I'm like watching new stuff and I can try to apply it in training, that's already something for me. It's better than I don't have the time or maybe the patience sometimes to drill for hours like I used to when I was a blue purple belt.
Mm.
But at least like doing the study, watching fights or watching instructions, whatever makes you learn more, it's definitely an important aspect of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Terrific. I think trial and error was the big thing you mentioned there, right? Just try to figure out what's best for you.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah, some people drill more and improve a lot better. Some people want to train more. So it really it's about it comes down to like what has been having the most success for you.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, man. Thank you. Alrighty, another one. Another one about training. Um, Camilla wants to know, Professor, and I think this is maybe in the context of also training in the gi, right? To support training in the gi. How many no gi classes do you recommend to train on a weekly basis? And how important do you think it is to train no gi? You're a world champion in both the pajamas and no pajamas. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I've been putting my pajamas aside for a little bit this year. I've been training mostly nogi, but I would say that you go ahead and do what you have the most fun doing, or you feel like you need to improve more. It's hard to split up on a training and try to become great at one thing if you're doing both at the same time.
Mm.
In my opinion, but if you're not trying to like pursue competition, if that's not the goal is just to become an overall better grappler, better jiu-jitsu practitioner, then I would say, like go half and half throughout the week. Like I personally train Ogi now every day, but the others the hours that I've put in the gi, I'm not even comparably close to what I train no gi. You know, like gi is just so many more hours.
Mm.
So I'm just trying to like evolve all aspects because I really like to see jiu-jitsu as a whole. You know, the takedown part of it, the ground, bottom, both top, defense, offense, side control, mount, every single aspect of it. So like I feel like the no gi is what I can absorb much more knowledge right now because
Mm.
I've spent less hours on the mat. So it's just whatever makes you happy, you know, and gets you going and keeps you training.
Mm. I might ask a quick follow-up question for myself on that note, actually. As you know, the landscape of jiu-jitsu changes, especially IBJJF now is changing to include heel hooks, changing rules around reaping, at least for the top divisions, the black belt divisions. Is that a big part of why you're changing your focus to be able to compete in those domains, or is nogi just something you feel less experienced with anyway? How are you? How do you feel like you're changing your training as jiu-jitsu changes?
Well, yeah, you mentioned I won Nogi Worlds up to like brown belt. I was like doing doing it both at the same time, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
after first year black belt, I set my mind to win worlds in the gi. So I was like, man, there's no way I can do both. You know, I gotta focus on one to make it happen, and after I'll start working on transitions. And then I kept staying more into the gi world for majority of my professional career. That
Mm-hmm.
now I'm like, okay, I want to go back and pick up from where I left off, you know, on the nogi, having some good performance in the black belt, but nothing that comes close to what I used to do in the color belt. So they're just trying to, you know, pick up from where I left off, do the training that it's enjoyable for me right now, that it is nogi. So it does change the landscape. You know, IBJJF, including heel hooks, is a huge part of like me being interested in doing it too, because jiu-jitsu no gi as a whole, like if you play guard and you don't have the ripping, you know, it's a different game, pretty
Yeah.
much like
Yeah.
a different sport, you know. It's
Yeah.
basically wrestling, you know, like if you can't use the ripping, if you can, you need to come up on the double or single, you know. So it gets more technical, and then I'm a very technical guy, you know, like I try to rely as much on techniques and concepts as I can. So when that was included in the IBJJF was pretty exciting for me personally.
Cool. Cool, man. Are you don't hate me for this question. Are you looking to get on some of those like flow grappling, who's number one, big exhibition nogi matches and get paid?
Yeah, for sure. You know, that'll be awesome to do one of those fights. I've been invited before for some super fights in the past when I wasn't so ready. You know, I feel like
Mm-hmm,
now I'm getting on in a good shape, no gi that I wanted to get and never got in the black belt yet. You know, like even like competing in ADCC 2019, I was pretty injured coming into it. Didn't train so much. I trained gi most of the year to win worlds in 2019, and then took a month off to come back and do like 2 3 months of training for ADCC. And then I like to think that my performance was pretty solid for first ADCC, and then seeing how much I improved now, like I'm uh, definitely like on a better place today, you know, and skill wise and as an athlete. So yeah, now I feel ready to start doing those
mm.
events if it comes down to it.
Man, looking forward to seeing it, Professor. A question here, perfect timing. What events do you have coming up in the future, or what are your future plans? I think, you know, especially in America, right? You guys are really starting to open up, and there's many more competitions happening now. What have you got in store?
So we got No Good Worlds coming up October 10th. Signed up for it. In the medium heavy division. Looking forward to it. It's gonna be my second Nogi Worlds as a black belt. I have not won the in a black belt yet. I've won in the purple and brown, so still chasing that big title in the black belt. So in the Nogi division, I should say. So yeah, maybe some super fights after that.
Mm.
Who's number one? Like we'll see. Like I fights that fulfill me. Like It's there's got to be like a title, winning worlds,
Mm,
winning ADCC trials, winning ADCC, or it's got to be a super fight that motivates me. You know, like
mm,
it's not about getting paid or anything like that. It's got to be a fight that gets me up in the morning to be motivated to fight. You know, a big title will get me up to for a training camp, a fight that or someone that I look up to, or up and coming guy that I think it's good jiu-jitsu. You know,
mm.
I'm down for it. You know, it's not about getting paid. Like
Yeah,
obviously, like it's cool to get paid and everything, but uh, it's just got to be a motivating fight for me.
man. Your heart's in the right place, making me look like a fool with my questions, Professor.
No,
Alrighty.
by no means, man. You gotta get paid too, you know. But when you're just chasing, payments, and then sometimes you're gonna take fights that you're not really, fully into it. So I look at a different way nowadays. You know, like
Mm,
the payments obviously naturally it's great, to be paid, but it's the fight. It's gotta motivate me, you know.
mm, mm. Man, awesome. Alrighty, I think we're slowly running out of questions. I got one more myself. I'm not sure if you're going to hate me for it when I get to it, but that's all right. Last question here from Tony. Um, Tony wants to know, especially, man, you've just been through a big lockdown right after a few years of big, competition results. How, when we're stuck in this lockdown, although hopefully we're getting out of it soon ourselves, but when we're stuck in lockdown, what do you think is the best things people can look at, ways to keep improving their jiu-jitsu?
I think you can make it happen. You know, there's a lot of content out there, especially the beginning of the lockdown was the toughest because there was no events, no fights going on, absolutely like nobody leaving their houses, So
Yeah.
that was pretty tough. But I'm sure, you'll find a buddy that you train with and you're gonna do your rounds in the garage or a family member, whatever the case may be, that you can drill techniques on or keep your journey going. It's not just about uh never nothing is ever going to beat the in-person big class experience that we have, but you can make up for it as much as you can by watching fights. There's so many fights going on. We have a great event coming up this weekend, was number one Grand Prix. We have Gi Worlds coming up. We have a lot of like interesting events that for us to watch. A lot of content for you to improve too. I know, like I watch some tutorials, super fights that make me improve a lot. So those are things that they can definitely get on in the meantime, because we do situations like that. We do have more times in our hands, so might as well put it to good use.
That's it, man. The power of the internet. We've got you here talking to us right now. How good's that? What are you even asking for,
Awesome,
Tony?
man.
Ridiculous question, young man. Alrighty. Well, look, I think that's it. My last question for you, Professor. Um, I've been biting my tongue this whole time. I wasn't sure if it was a good idea to ask, but a whole bunch of times online I saw that your nickname is Frodo. Is that true, man?
That's true. Yeah. Professor Henrique would know that, like growing up in Brazil, that was my nickname, and somehow got carried along to BJJ Heroes website in Jiu-Jitsu too. So some people in Jiu-Jitsu call me that, but that was just an old nickname from back when I was like 12, 13 years old.
Crazy. Hey, just like Frodo, dude, you succeeded. Well done.
There you go.
Alrighty, look, I think we'll wrap it up there. Professor, thank you so much for your time, man. Really struck by how humble you are, all your responses, and how generous you were in sharing your time and your energy and your knowledge with us. So thank you so much, brother. If you have anything you want to say before we log off, please, all yours.
Yeah, just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks for the invite, for considering me. Hopefully, like I gave some good insight. Didn't get you guys too bored out there, and and it was a good conversation. And yeah, hopefully, I see some of the faces I'm seeing right now through Zoom one day, visiting Australia. Hopefully, I wish good luck on this process of lockdown. Hopefully things get back to normal as soon as possible. And I wish nothing but good health for everybody and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Good luck and good health to you too. Guys, if you want to unmute and start screaming goodbye to our guest, away you go. He should be able to hear you now. Professor, thank you so much.
Prof.
Aqui, professor, bora aqui.
Obrigado.
Yeah.
Valeu, professor.
Valeu.
Excelente. Pô, mineirinho é sinistro. Pô,
Valeu, professor.
valeu, meu irmão. Pô, excelente, hein, cara. O inglês é campeão mundial também, hein?
Que
Porra.
isso, Marcelo. Então tem que chegar no
Pô, o
nível de
inglês
vocês,
é bom
hein?
demais, pô. Que
Valeu.
isso? Pô, é igual o teu jiu-jitsu, pô.
Pô, obrigado mesmo. Valeu.
Valeu,
Nem sabia
obrigado
que você
pela
tava
força aí, cara.
aí. Valeu, obrigado.
Obrigado pela força aí, foi demais, cara. Muito bom. Obrigado.
É nóis, irmão.
Valeu, Japão. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Terrific. Thank you, Gabriel. Thank you so much, Professor.